camel caravans moving slowly across endless deserts, noisy bazaars packed with spices, silk, and whispers in countless languages, cities rising, thriving, then vanishing into dust. What was the Silk Road, really? And why does a network of overland trade routes from thousands of years ago still shape the way we think about culture, power, and connection today? It's hard to imagine a time before the familiar map, before borders were neatly drawn and flight times replaced months of perilous travel. But roll back the clock 2,000 years, and the lines tying Europe and Asia together weren't simple red trails on atlas pages. They were living arteries of exchanged goods, ideas, and ambitions, pulsing across mountains, deserts, and empires that rose and fell with breathtaking speed. To get a sense of the Silk Road's magnitude, picture this. The longest caravan journey could stretch for more than 7,000 kilometers from the heart of China all the way to the Mediterranean. But that distance wasn't covered by a single traveler, or even a single group. Goods and stories leapfrogged from oasis to oasis, passing through hands that belonged to Sogdian merchants, Persian scribes, Roman soldiers, Mongolian horsemen, and countless others whose names are long forgotten. The Silk Road wasn't truly a road, and it wasn't just about silk. It was a web, sometimes more like a wild tangle than a tidy thread, stitched together by necessity, opportunity, and sometimes pure luck. Contraband and curiosities, as well as raw necessity, crossed its sands. Silk from China, yes, but also Central Asian horses, Persian glassware, Roman coins, Indian spices, paper, religious texts, even the secrets of gunpowder and the disease-causing bacteria that would trigger pandemics. Why silk, though? Why did this shimmering, delicate fabric become such an obsession for people who had never seen the mulberry groves or the tireless silkworms of China? The answer lies in a little patch of agricultural ingenuity and a lot of mystery. For centuries, the Chinese kept their secret of silk's creation as closely guarded as any national treasure. To the Romans, silk was so rare and beautiful that it was said to be worth its weight in gold. But the real legacy of the Silk Road was never just about the things bought and sold. At every stop, ideas lingered longer than merchants. Entire philosophies traveled alongside merchandise. Buddhism, for example, journeyed from India into Central Asia, then through oases like Dunhuang, carried by monks and traders, and blossomed as far as Xi'an. Its scriptures, stories, and symbols shifting as they met new cultures. Reflect for a moment on these lines from ancient Chinese poetry, found along the Silk Road. Beneath Dunhuang's silent sky, caravans passed dreamlike by. Sand and years slip through a sieve, but stories in painted caves live. These words are a window into how travelers themselves saw the journey. Roads swept clean by wind, stars guiding their way, and the haunting knowledge that riches can disappear. But stories, the ones you carve into cave walls or stitch into memory, those endure. Pause to consider how that sense of passage shaped what the Silk Road actually was. The traders, monks, and migrants along these routes weren't just peddling material goods. They were actively constructing a layered, collaborative record of what matters. Cultural exchange as real and durable as stone inscriptions, as fleeting as the rumors whispered over campfires. Let's zoom in on a single epic, the moment the Han Dynasty in China looked west. Envoys set out around the 2nd century BCE, forging alliances with distant peoples to halt invasion and secure horses. A military, political, and economic mission that would spiral outward into unforeseen consequences. Soon enough, China's silk wasn't just clothing the elite at home. It became currency and status symbol, craved from the Roman Empire to distant, newly wealthy societies in the Middle East. Imagine for a second the thrill and terror of embarking on that journey. Oasis towns like Samarkand glittered with wealth and danger. Mountains hid bandits. Deserts brought death by thirst. Every arrival was an unlikely victory, and every departure a leap into the unknown. Consider this fragment from a 7th century Buddhist scripture translated in a Silk Road oasis. The traveler who walks 1,000 li sees countless paths diverge and meet. Each meeting marks a turning's key. Destiny unwinds in strangers' feet. Here, the spirit of the Silk Road comes alive. Every traveler an unknown variable in an equation that binds continents. Destiny doesn't just belong to kings and emperors. It's written in the chance meetings, the shared shelter, the borrowed language. But the Silk Road wasn't just a highway for wealth or ideas. It could be a shadow corridor for weapons, for outbreaks like the Black Death, and for the ambitions of conquerors who saw not a route, but a prize. Genghis Khan's Mongol Empire redrew the map with force, stretching the Silk Road's reach deeper into Europe and further south along maritime branches that hugged the Indian Ocean. Over millennia, the web kept shifting. New empires rose in Central Asia, controlling key choke points and growing rich from taxing and protecting passing caravans. Routes multiplied, especially as new technologies like the compass, or new demands like the Europeans' insatiable appetite for spices, shaped commerce and conquest. Every power along the road left its mark. A palace, a ruined caravanserai, a new word borrowed and bent into another tongue. It's worth pausing again with a philosophical question posed by a Persian sage said to have lived near the heart of the Silk Road. What is the narrowest bridge between worlds? Not the timber, nor the stone. It is the moment two strangers trade questions, and both become less alone. Here's what stands out. It wasn't simply silks and spices that bound east to west. Curiosity itself, manifest in shared questions and conversations, wove tighter connections than any material good ever could. Think about how, as information flowed alongside travel and trade, religious texts in Sanskrit, Arabic, Chinese, and Greek circulated, sometimes transformed beyond recognition. In the oasis town of Dunhuang, caves still preserve paper scrolls written in dozens of languages, mixing stories from Buddhist, Christian, Zoroastrian, and even local animist traditions. A visitor standing in those dimly lit caves today touches a literal palimpsest. So many scripts written over each other that each page is a layered map of meetings and migrations. But for all its grandeur, the Silk Road's fortunes were always fragile. Political stability could shatter overnight. Climates shifted, making once verdant plains into impassable steppe. Banditry or war could dash the hopes of generations. The medieval period, especially, saw the overland route's glory fade as maritime trade began to dominate, with European navigators now sending ships for eastern treasures, bypassing many of the Silk Road's harshest obstacles. Yet the web never vanished entirely, and the imprint remained. The Silk Road's spirit is found not only in the exchange of luxury goods, but in the preservation of a specific kind of curiosity-driven cooperation. Commerce was the excuse, but the outcome was a blueprint for cross-cultural societies. And as we reflect today, we see shadows of that blueprint in the tangled cultures of every multi-ethnic city, in ancient recipes revived with exotic spices, and even in the ideas coded into modern technologies that leap borders in milliseconds. Listen to a fragment of a speech attributed to a traveler after crossing centuries along these trade routes. The wind does not care for kings or merchants. It carries news of sorrow, laughter, and invention. So too, the road erases boundaries drawn in sand and reminds us all, every journey transforms the traveler. Every journey transforms the traveler. That's as true for today's backpackers, tracing the Marco Polo's path as it was for the merchants of Han China, or the missionaries who smuggled themselves through perilous passes to carry not just goods, but hope, stories, and the fragile seeds of trust. Now, look around your own world. The echoes of the Silk Road thread through seemingly ordinary objects. The paper in your notebook, the pepper on your dinner, the patterns in your city's textiles, all play their part in a chain reaching back through time, to the caravans slogging across steppe and sand. Yet, for all its influence, what we call the Silk Road is as much myth as map. There was never a single road, only a living, ambiguous network. It reminds us that history's most powerful connections are rarely straight lines. They are the messy, unpredictable routes traveled by real people, shaped by necessity, curiosity, and the drive to find meaning in the unfamiliar. The Silk Road's lesson is less about commerce and more about contact. The awkward, exhilarating, sometimes dangerous meeting of difference and possibility. To walk that road, even in imagination, is to understand that what makes us human isn't what we keep, but what we risk sharing. The courage to step into the unknown, the generosity to listen and to trade not just goods, but ideas, and the humility to know that every meeting changes us, just a little. So next time you hear about globalization, immigration, or cultural fusion, remember, the blueprint isn't new. It's traced in the footsteps of camel herders, monks, poets, and traders who turned a hazardous journey into history's most fascinating crossroads. The Silk Road wasn't just a road, it was and remains humanity's longest conversation.